to Stories Beyond Borders, the podcast where culture, identity, and personal journeys come together. I'm your host, Urmi, and in each episode we sit with voices from around the world to explore what it means to belong, to move, to grow, and to find home. Whether you're a culture kid, an expat, or someone redefining identity on your own, these are your stories too. Today's guest is someone whose story beautifully reflects the complexity and richness of growing up between two cultures. I'm so excited to introduce Michelle Foltinger Garcia, a Spanish-Danish actress, writer, and podcast host who was born and raised in Marbella, Spain, in a vibrant multicultural environment. She studied communication and media in Liverpool, chased her dream of acting all the way to New York, and now calls Madrid home. Michelle is also the creator of the podcast Unrooted, where she explores identity, dual nationality, and what it means to belong when you grow up between two cultures. Through her storytelling, Michelle creates space for those who feel they belong both everywhere and nowhere. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the introduction, Urmi. Really nice to be here, having a chat with you.
Yes. Yes, I'm very excited to have you. So let's start off with you telling us a little bit about your story. What's your story?
Sure. So yes, I am half Spanish, half Danish. I was born and raised in the south of Spain in a very international city called Marbella. And I went to an international school there. I had never gone to a Spanish school. I was also kind of raised in a very international environment at home, being that my dad is Danish and my mom is Spanish. However, even though my mom was Spanish, she's not really your typical traditional Spanish woman, because I think my international background really kind of comes mostly from my mom, because even though my dad is Danish and he has traveled a lot, at the end of the day he grew up in a very Danish household, whereas my mom, she never actually grew up in Spain. There was parts of her childhood that she spent time in Spain, but most of the time my grandfather, he was a telecommunications engineer. Mm-hmm. So they had to travel a lot for his job, and one of the first places he had to go to was Canada, Montreal, where you are right now.
No way.
And so that's where my mother was born. So my grandfather moved there with his wife, my grandmother, and they had my mom and their other kids. And then from there they just traveled a lot. My mom, from there they went to Congo in Africa, and then Paraguay, and then Argentina, England, France. So because my mom was basically like a huge third culture kid, growing up in all these different environments, all these different kind of cultures that were so different from one another, I think it was kind of instilled in me, and one of the reasons why I feel like such a third culture kid, not just because I was growing up in that international environment of half Spanish, half Danish, and then mixed with other nationalities at school and such, but also because of my mom. And then from Marbella, I went to study in the University of Liverpool, which was a little bit of a culture shock for me. I mean, not so much, because it's England, and I kind of knew what I was expecting, being that I had gone to a British international school, Marbella, but it's still, the north of England is quite a different environment to somewhere like Marbella.
Yeah.
And then from there I lived in London for a couple years, and then from there I went to New York, and I lived in New York for a few years. And during these years I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. I knew that I had this passion for acting, and that's kind of what drew me to New York, and what was my purpose for going to New York was to pursue acting. And that was an amazing experience. In New York City, I studied acting, and then I went on to working as an actress, doing short films, working in off-Broadway shows. And then most recently, last summer, I decided to move back to Spain after having lived outside of Spain for almost 10 years, because I left when I was 18.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a really big kind of scary decision, because when I left Spain, I thought that I was like never gonna go back, at least like not to live. Maybe in my retirement, like when I retire or something like that. But like, I just thought that I was going to end up living in America for the rest of my life, because I don't know, I had this kind of like obsession with America. But after being, around 4 years in New York City, fighting with like visa issues and a lot of other things, I started to realize that America wasn't the right place for me. And so I kind of just threw in the towel and decided to come home to Spain and reevaluate my life and everything. And now I'm here in Madrid, and to be honest, I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of my life journey.
Yeah, you have a very fascinating story. Like, I feel like you were exposed to so many cultures right from the beginning, and which makes it a lot more interesting. And the fact that even your mom was like that too, and I feel like you said, it was in your blood to have this kind of exposure and to follow a little bit what your mother did. And from which year to which year were you in New York?
In New York, I moved there from January 2021 until 2024.
Okay.
So yeah, and it was an interesting time to move to New York, because it was kind of right in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
I had been to New York before because my sister was living there for a few years. Now she lives in Miami, but I had been there before. But moving there in the pandemic was definitely a different vibe to what I was used to, because the city was so empty. It was kind of eerie. It was a little creepy. I didn't feel that safe, to be honest. And it was winter. It was one of like the coldest winters I've experienced in New York. Like, we got crazy snowstorms, so it's like there was like nobody in the street. It was almost apocalyptic. But then, you know, over time, everything started to open up again, and New York City kind of got its movement back. But I will say, I feel like New York is not the same since the pandemic. The charm that it had once, I feel like it's not there. I don't know if that charm went away because I started living there, and maybe the sort of novelty of New York City and like the glamour of it starts to wear off a little bit. When I would visit my sister, it was always like, oh, I'm in New York City, you know? But I think after living there, you kind of see the true colors of New York City, and I don't know, I think you feel different about it after some time.
Did you grow up watching American movies that were shot in New York, or not?
Yes. Yeah. I watched a lot of that's why I put America on such a pedestal for such a long time, since I was a little kid, because as someone who wanted to be an actress, of course I was obsessed with movies and TV shows, and wanting to also like embody a different character, I think also kind of really makes sense for someone like me who is unrooted and who has been exposed to so many different cultures and nationalities and everything, because it's like I feel like I have one personality with a certain, you know, group, and another personality with another group, depending on like the nationality or culture and whatnot. And it's kind of like the same when you're an actor, you kind of embody these different characters, and you don't really belong to one thing, you know. And so that's something that I was very fascinated about. And so, yeah, I really loved movies and TV shows, specifically American ones, and watching America through the media, like movies and TV shows. It gives you a certain perspective on America. You see it through a specific sort of lens, and then you kind of have a specific idea of what it's going to be like when you go there. And it kind of lives up to that expectation when you go there for the first time. But after some time, when you really truly live an American lifestyle, you kind of start to realize that it's not like the movies and it's not like the TV shows.
Right.
Because of like the society there, you know, it's just, it's not a good quality of life, I would say.
I'm pretty sure. I always say there is a difference, you know, going to the States as a visitor, like as a traveler, and going there as someone who wants to live. You know, it's a two different kind of lifestyle. You know, like you're going there as a visitor, you're traveling, and there is so much, you know, glam, and you know, you're living the American, you know, life and stuff like that. But then when you start working and living there, I'm pretty sure it's very difficult because New York is very expensive. It's very hectic. It's all about go, run. And you know, the reason why I was asking you, like, did you grow up watching American movies? It's because I also grew up watching American movies, and I had this whole ideology about the States. And so even I had the same experience as you when I did not live there, but I visited it. And when I went, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in New York. You know, it lives up to that expectation. So yeah. And you wanted to add something? Go ahead.
Just that kind of hustle and bustle of New York City just makes you feel like you're working towards something big. It makes you feel like you have like this big purpose, like something that's bigger than you, you know? And I think like I see sort of like my friends who still live in New York City, right, through social media and whatnot, and I'm very like happy for them that they're still living there and they're still living their life there and whatnot. But at the same time, I just personally feel like we've all sort of gaslighted ourselves into thinking that we are living this amazing dream, this amazing American dream. But in reality, I feel like we have to tell ourselves that in order to feel good about what we're doing, to feel like that we're there for a good reason. But now that I'm kind of like outside of it and seeing it from an outside perspective, I'm like, it's kind of like Stockholm syndrome in a way. Like New York has you trapped, and you have to tell yourself that you are living the dream in order to feel like this is worth the pain that I'm suffering every day. Because when I look back, I am realizing how unhappy I was in that situation and how much better my life is now, you know? But yeah, I think that's what New York does to you.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your, because you have a podcast, and we had also this discussion where we said we're everywhere but nowhere. What was your experience with that? Like, because you had so many, you know, you grew up in so many places, but somehow you called, you know, Spain your home. And how did you come to that conclusion, given that you had so many places that were part of you, that belonged to you when you were growing up?
So growing up, really, I just grew up in Spain, you know, but obviously, like, I had influences, international influences through my mom and through my friends at school, because in my friendship group, my best friend was Russian, the other one was half Spanish, half Dutch, the other one was half Slovakian, half Dutch, and the other one was half Belgium, half German, and the other one half Swiss, half German.
Oh my gosh.
So everybody has their own kind of culture at home that they would bring to school and to like this friendship group, you know? And then there were so many others. I had friends that were from Egypt, or I had a friend who was half Italian, half Pakistani, you know? So I had like those international influences and kind of got an idea of those cultures through my friends, you know? But really, I just grew up in, at least someone like me, maybe not other people might not relate to that, but I've just kind of been on like thinking about what does home really mean to me? And this all started when I moved back to Spain. And what triggered it was because, like I said, I lived outside of Spain for 10 years and then moved back to Spain, and I told myself, oh, I'm going home to Spain. But once I got to Spain, I didn't feel like I belong. And you're supposed to feel like you belong in your home, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, is Spain my home? And that's what started this whole a place, because I move around so much. And like, for example, right now I feel like where I'm here in this co-living, like this is my home, but I'm gonna move somewhere again, and that's going to be my new home. And I think that's okay, is like, you're going to have so many versions of you in life, and each version is going to have a different home each time. At least someone like me, maybe not other people might not relate to that, but I've just kind of been on like thinking about what does home really mean to me. And this all started when I moved back to Spain. And what triggered it was because, like I said, I lived outside of Spain for 10 years and then moved back to Spain, and I told myself, oh, I'm going home to Spain. But once I got to Spain, I didn't feel like I belong. And you're supposed to feel like you belong in your home, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, is Spain my home? And that's what started this whole journey with my podcast, is to figure out what really is home. Because I thought I was coming home when I left New York, but then I got here and I feel like an outsider, because when I'm mingling with Spanish people here in Madrid, they don't see me like a Spaniard. I don't really feel like a Spaniard around them, so that's why I started the podcast, because I wanted to figure this out and talk to other people and get their perspective and their definitions of home, because I happen to move into a co-living which is super international, which is what I'm used to, and that's Unrooted was to kind of figure this whole identity that I was having, and it's been an amazing journey so far, starting that, interviewing different people who have international backgrounds and getting their stories, and understanding their idea of home, their idea of belonging, how they kind of place themselves in the world, and yeah, it's been an amazing journey so far. I wrapped up the first season in June, and I want to start a second season. The episode that I did with you about a month ago, that's going to be in the second season. I'm kind of lining up new guests to interview in the second season. I'm also trying to figure out like how I can implement a different angle in my podcast, trying to do something a little bit like different, something fresh and new. Also trying to figure out new forms of content that I can produce for my social media, for Unrooted. But yeah, for the moment I've been taking a little break from it, because if I'm completely honest, I kind of burnt myself out a little bit, because I went full on with this podcast when I started it in March or April. I was unemployed at the time, so I had a lot of time on my hands. So I was like really going full on with it. But once I got hired and everything, I had less time, and yeah, it became quite intense. And so yeah, I've been taking a little break from it, but I'm going to jump back on it in September, and so I'm really excited to sort of see where I take Unrooted, and yeah.
Yes. So I do want to touch upon a bit what you just said about, friendship and the fact that you grew up in a very international environment.
Yeah.
And this is where it makes me and you very different, because like you said, you feel most at home with people that are similar to you, and I'm assuming it goes back to the fact that people who are similar to you, they understand where you're coming from, they understand your feeling, they understand this feeling of like, not belonging when you are not around people that understand you. And and even at home, you were speaking about, this with your family, and even your family have a very mixed background. Because I had a situation where I have friends who just have one culture only. They grew up in one country, they have one culture only, and then they don't understand me when I say I feel like I don't belong. And so I feel like it's very important, especially when you grow up, that you have people that are similar to you, like, so that you can feel like you're part of a community.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that you said, all of these friends that you just mentioned, that they're half of this, half of that, half of this, half of that, because I was not exposed to that at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Right. Yeah. So I remember that's what you told me.
Yeah, I wasn't exposed to it. So I feel like you were exposed to this whole third culture type of life already, from an early age, which is why you're just much more comfortable with people that are mixed races, mixed ethnicities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's definitely what I grew up in, and that's always what I'm going to be most comfortable with. And I feel like it's the people that I relate to the most, with people who have just kind of like very Spanish people who have grown up in just a Spanish culture, a Spanish household. I just don't relate to them,
Yeah.
I appreciate that, and I respect them a lot. And, when I sometimes see like videos online of, in like Sevilla, for example, like Spanish people singing in the street, playing guitar, and they know like all the words to these very Spanish songs. I'm like, I don't even know this Spanish song, you know what I mean? But everybody who's like in the town surrounding, they're all singing the same song. They know the words, they know the lyrics because they grew up with it at home, for example. But for example, I wouldn't know it. And this actually reminds me of a story. When I went to a bar with my friends, Brazilian friend and my friend from Honduras, who also have international backgrounds. And we were at this bar, and there was live music, and I was watching the live music, and my two friends were talking to these two Spanish guys, and they were asking them if they knew who Estopa was. I think it's called Estopa, which is a Spanish band. It's two men, and they're very famous in Spain. And my friends were like, oh, Michelle's from Spain, maybe she knows. And I turned around and they were like, Estopa, whatever. And I was like, no, I don't know who that is. And they were like, how can you call yourself Spanish? How can you say you're Spanish if you don't know who Estopa is? And he was like, what did he say? He was like, yeah, you're not Spanish then, or something like that, And I gave him the middle finger. I gave him the middle finger and I walked away, because it really it hit a nerve. It hit a nerve because, yes, even though I don't identify with being super Spanish, it's still a part of me, My mom is Spanish. I'm from Spain. I grew up in Spain. I don't listen to Spanish music, and neither does my mom. My mom, who has fully Spanish parents, I asked her, do you know who Estopa is? She was like, no. Because we have never listened to this at home. We don't know, But when I went online and I looked at some of their songs, I recognized them from listening to them on the radio when I'm driving in the car or whatever. So I was like, oh, that's who it is. But I just never knew the name, because in my own time, it's not on my Spotify, I've heard it on the radio, but I don't pay attention to a lot of Spanish music. So it's just things like that it really did hit a nerve, because it just made me feel like somebody was trying to take away a part of me or something.
Yes, a part of your identity.
It's like, okay, yeah, and it's like, okay, this person is yelling at me, telling me that I don't deserve to be Spanish and that I'm not Spanish. What am I left with? Okay, Danish. Well, I don't resonate that much with Danish people, because the only thing we have in common is that we have a parent that's from Denmark, but I don't speak the language. I didn't grow up there, so I'm not that familiar with Danish traditions. I know some through my cousins and such, but I'm not like, I wasn't marinated in it. It wasn't something that was a big part of my environment, you know? So it's like, what am I left with then? Like, who am I? Where, like, do you know what I mean? I'm just like a being existing and that's it. I don't know. So it's just like, as human beings, we want to belong to a tribe. We want to belong to a community, because we are social creatures. That's part of our nature, you know? And so when you get exiled by certain people, you just feel alone, and you feel like, I don't know. And so that feeling of feeling exiled and alone and not knowing what to belong to, that really started to get to me. And I was like, I want to talk to people about this, you know? And so the people who really understand that feeling are, I feel like, the international groups that were born somewhere but raised somewhere else, that their parents are not from that place that they were raised in, for example. And they don't know really where to belong. They're just kind of citizens of the world, or
global citizens. We're global citizens, like I like to say. So, Michelle, as we reach the end of this interview, I want to quickly ask you if you want to leave the audience or the listeners with a message, a very quick message.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess what I want to say is, the first thing I want to say is, like, you have to kind of own your story. I think something that I realized that I was kind of doing is, when I was explaining myself to people, explaining like where I'm from and who I am, I feel like I kind of would fumble on it. I would just be like, am I Spanish? Like, I didn't really know what to say or how to word it. And I guess the most important thing, if you feel like I do, is own your story. If the person says, oh, you're half Danish but you don't speak Danish, yeah, that's it. Like, you know, just own it, rather than feel ashamed that I don't speak the language of my father. Rather than feel ashamed, just own it and be like, yep. And then if I'm Spanish but I don't know that Spanish tradition, yep. You know, just own it, be proud of it, no matter what. Just own your story, even if it's messy or complicated, especially those messy and complicated parts, because that's what makes you such an interesting person. And it doesn't need to be like perfectly packaged or anything like that. You are who you are. All the imperfection, all the nuances, everything is what makes you you, and what makes you unique. And then I guess the other thing is, you don't have to belong to one place, you know, or one identity or one version of yourself to be a whole person. Sometimes being unrooted is what gives you the freedom to grow in unexpected directions. I feel like unrooted is the equivalent of being free. You know, you spread your wings and you can go there, you can go here without any fear, and you know you're going to adapt, and you know you're going to thrive.
Yes. Love it. I love everything that you said. I love the first part about, you know, owning your story. I definitely couldn't agree more. And don't let anyone tell your story. So with that, can you tell us how people can connect with you?
Yes, I have my personal Instagram is Shelly_FG. It's on Instagram. And then my Instagram for my podcast Unrooted is Unrooted Podcast Official. And then on TikTok it's just Unrooted Podcast. And then on YouTube also Unrooted Podcast. So yeah, that's how you can find me online.
Yes, and I will definitely list all the information that you have provided. Once again, Michelle, thank you for coming as a guest, and thanks for listening to this episode of Stories Beyond Borders. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, home isn't always a place, sometimes it's a story. Until next time, keep crossing borders and telling your story.